Hey everybody. Alright, so I finally got that other video uploaded. Now, the Great Wall. Again, I'm going to try to keep this short. I'm very terrible at that. But slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. So, the Great Wall with Matt Damon is on the outside feature for those who have not seen it and do not want me to spoil it for them. This is your not spoiling point, okay? It's about some European guy or a couple of individuals that are of European descent that managed to find themselves on, I guess you could say, the Great Wall of China. Let's put it like that for right now. And eventually find out that there's some conflict going on between some non-human entities and the Chinese. And they decide to get themselves into the conflict to see if they could do something about it and find themselves. So, that's your not spoiling point, okay? That's all you're getting. Moving on now to the spoiler alert. The film is ultimately about a couple of Europeans that find themselves in the hunt and search for what they did not understand at that point in time, historically speaking, supposedly, which is the black powder, the explosive material to which, eventually led to guns, cannons, etc., 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 and eventually to what we have now today, which is, off the top of my head, all the specific terminology for that is just right out the window. So, if you want to figure that stuff out, go for that. I need to keep my mind on track here. So, Great Wall of China, this thing. So, this film ultimately has very odd perspective as to why they had the Great Wall. I don't particularly believe that concept that, the wall was just made for, one particular thing. I definitely think it had multiple purposes for it, and ultimately for the sake of defenses. And the whole reason, which, if anyone knows anything about walls, you make a full circle, generally speaking, for walls. And yes, you will use the terrain in order to help make those walls. However, if you know anything but, the Great Wall, it's a very long, windy wall. So it's, I don't know. In my opinion, what little I know about strategy from my time in service in the United States Marine Corps, there's a lot of points there I could just scale it and just deal with the problem at hand, infect certain areas and conquer certain other areas, lay traps, and it would just be too much of a problem to maintain. But anyhow, however, I think it definitely brought in the understanding that many people do not have, which is the use of it against not human people. Now, I do believe that giants did exist among us. I mean, it says it in the Bible. It certainly said it in various different cultures. But I think they definitely started dying out, at least by around the time of Rome and the Roman Empire. Mainly closer to its fall that they really start to just be completely diminished. However, the history behind the Great Wall was certainly around the time frame. So that leads into the other part of the movie. They bring up these creatures called the Tao Tai. And there are these green monstrous creatures that come technically from the earth, but there's like a specific mountain they come from. And evidently it all started where some rock from space, like a comet essentially, comes and hits the earth and lands right in these mountains, burrowing deep within it. And eventually these Tao Tai, these monsters, come out, and they have one leader, and it's a queen. All the rest of them are these mindless things. And they come out every 60 years or so and try to devour everything in sight. Anyhow, when I looked up what Tao Tai means, it's supposed to mean, when it comes to the little numerology stuff, it means 9, which is interesting, seeing as when it comes to the interpretation of Satan, numerologically speaking, he considers himself perfect. 9 is perfect number when it comes to multiplication. Whenever you multiply into something else, it eventually add back to itself. Excuse me. And that's not what really caught my attention. I mean, a little bit, but it's when I found out that its definition and its use is a military and civilian commander. So it's not a civilian, excuse me, when it comes to you're just simply in charge of a regiment of civilians, but you're in charge of civil matters. So communication between people, military and non-military. The leader of the Tao Tai was the single-minded entity, the queen, that controlled the rest of their creatures. That's exactly what that means if you think about it. And the concept of perfection. The ultimate commander would be literally the mind, while everyone else is the extension of the mind. So that was a little weird, creepy, and it got me to thinking because of technology nowadays and how they want to kind of meld people's minds, not just with physically with technology, but also socially speaking. You know, we have right speak, wrong speak, all these other stupid things that they're trying to break down gender-wise. They're just trying to destroy what differences there are, so we just don't pay attention to differences. We just allow some outside entity to think for ourselves, just like the Tao Tai. So I thought that was curious. So the Tao Tai have one queen, already mentioned that. Massive, oh yeah, they have these creatures have these massive, horrendous looking mouths. And I guess, in my mind, it represented to me consumption. The sins. They are so consumed by every single sin that they're just consuming in all those ways. Now, obviously, you don't see these fucking things just raping the shit out of people or going in and stealing people's things, but I guess that's kind of how I saw that. I know that they were voracious and they were all hungry, so it dealt more with gluttony. But in my mind, what they were representing symbolically with the big mouth was that consumption. So essentially losing one's own personal capabilities of thought just for basic, debased, vain shit of just the 7 cents. So I guess in a way that's, if there was a one mind with a army of human beings, I would see that as like the purge plus some kind of zombie virus, you know what I'm saying, where all the people are mindless, but purge-wise, they're just doing whatever they want, because they're being allowed to do so, unless their little hierarchy leader, who's in like the center, is just like fucking using her little fucking antennae and just, I want all you guys to go fuck around over that way, which would be effective in some areas, but not so effective in others, because that would mean that on the individualistic level, which is more important than the mass scale, it would leave too much for error, in my opinion. It would be chaos, pure chaos, quite literally. But again, it's odd to think about. The main characters were both orphan warriors. So Matt Damon's character was an orphan warrior, and he made mention of the Pope at one point. Essentially, he talked about all the things he did, all the things he worked for, but what caught me was at the end of what he was saying, of what he used to be, and what he has fought for, the last thing he fought for was the Pope. Then he moved on. That caught my eye, simply because of what that meant historically speaking. Excuse me, stuttering issue. In that moment, it seemed as a drip of truth that was showing itself. The Catholic Church had good uses, but it simply was a form of control over the mind. It's a reflection of the Tao Tai. One spiritual leader that led others through chaos to gather strength and then push them into crusades. So, please think on that one. That's what caught me. With the Tao Tao, you had various different factions. You had the Red, which were they're missile-oriented individuals, which I thought was interesting. Fire, like, fire! They're all red, just fire is firing. I don't know, play on words maybe. Blue, which was kind of like their concept of, like, Blue was all their female troops that were lightweight, and they're able to jump down from the walls with frickin' rope on them, which I thought was terribly stupid. I would never even do it with human beings, for crying out loud. You just fucking like, alright, I'm just gonna wait and pike them. So, I'm guessing that was the concept of water. So you had fire, you had water, and then yellow, I think they were kind of, they didn't really explain them that well, in my opinion. I'm guessing they're kind of more along the lines, the quick reaction force. So to a degree, they're kind of a mixture between melee, but also they deal with cavalry. You know, they deal with archery. They're just an amalgamation of things. So I guess air. They might be a representation of air. And black. That was infantry, purely. And I guess when I saw that, I thought that was a little strange, because infantry, I would probably constitute something as green, because you're on the ground, infantry. But they decided to go for black, which again I thought was strange, because it also reminded me of like Game of Thrones, taking the black, you know, being the army of the dead, going against the army of the dead. Dead and black kind of go together in a whimsical sense, spiritual sense, in a symbolic sense. Alright, last but not least I wanted to mention, that I thought was curious, was magnets. It was a slight mention in there, and I think it has more along the lines that if you know anything about not Isaiah, Daniel, when he made mention of the various different empires that would come up when it comes to Babylon, the last one would be clay and iron. And when it comes to iron, magnets are attracted to certain metals, and especially iron. So, in my mind, I find it interesting because the one thing that allowed them to defeat the Tao Tai was magnets. It was a magnet, this big old rock where they threw it, and it allowed them to break through this, you know, shield of weird-looking creatures to kill the queen. Which, I guess, in a way, it just made me think that perhaps when it comes to magnets, they disrupt signals. They disrupt technology. They disrupt anything that has mechanics to it. No, not mechanics, electrical components. So there you go. So, I don't know, maybe that was a grain of truth in there, or maybe it was just a throw out for the sake of entertainment and to explain certain things. Who knows? But anyways, that's it for now. I've already made this way too long, so God bless to you all and good luck.